Hi everyone, welcome to The Witch's Book, Dark Tales. If you enjoy this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we see you on the other side.
I've always been fascinated by Japanese culture, so when I had the opportunity to spend 3 weeks in Japan for work, I made sure to extend my stay to do some personal travel. I'd spent time in Tokyo and Kyoto, seeing the major temples and tourist sites, but I wanted something more authentic, something off the beaten path. I found a listing for a traditional Japanese cabin in the mountains of Nagano Prefecture. The listing described it as a centuries-old structure that had been renovated with modern amenities, but maintained its historical character. The photos showed a beautiful wooden building surrounded by forest, with a view of the mountains. The price was reasonable, and the host had great reviews from previous guests, who raved about the peaceful atmosphere and authentic experience. I rented a car and drove up into the mountains on a Friday afternoon. The GPS took me down progressively narrower roads until I was on a single-lane mountain path with barely enough room for my small rental car. After about 20 minutes of this nerve-wracking drive, I finally saw the cabin. It was even more beautiful in person than in the photos. Traditional architecture, sliding doors, a small Engawa porch that wrapped around 2 sides. The host had left instructions for me to pick up the key from a lockbox by the entrance. There was a note in English welcoming me and explaining some basics about the cabin. How to use the ofuro bath, where the futon and bedding were stored, numbers to call if I had any problems. I spent the first day settling in and exploring the immediate area around the cabin. There was a small stream about 50 yards into the forest and a path that seemed to lead further up the mountain. The silence was incredible. No cars, no people, no modern noise at all. Just wind through the trees and occasionally a bird call. It was exactly the peaceful retreat I'd been looking for. That night, I made a simple dinner in the small kitchen and sat on the Engawa watching the sun set over the mountains. It was one of those perfect moments where you feel completely at peace with the world. I went to bed early, spreading out the futon in the main room and opening the sliding door slightly to let in the cool mountain air. I woke up around midnight to the sound of someone crying. Not loud, but clear enough that it woke me from sleep. A woman's voice, sobbing somewhere outside. I sat up, listening. The crying continued for maybe a minute, then stopped abruptly. I waited, straining to hear anything else, but there was only silence. I told myself it must have been an animal, maybe a fox or some other creature that made sounds similar to human crying. I'd read that foxes could sound eerily human sometimes. I closed the sliding door and went back to sleep. The next night, the same thing happened. I woke around midnight to the sound of crying. This time it was closer, like it was just outside the cabin. I got up and looked through the window, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. The forest was too thick, and there was no moon that night. The crying lasted longer this time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and it sounded so genuinely distressed that I felt I should try to help whoever it was. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the front door, calling out in English, asking if someone was there, if they needed help. The crying stopped immediately. I stood there in the doorway, shining my flashlight into the forest, but I couldn't see anyone. After a few minutes of silence, I went back inside and locked the door. I didn't sleep well the rest of that night. I kept listening for the crying, but it didn't come back. In the morning, I walked around the entire perimeter of the cabin, looking for any signs that someone had been there. Footprints, broken branches, anything. But the ground was covered in pine needles, and if someone had been there, they'd left no trace. I was planning to stay for 5 more nights, but I was starting to feel uneasy about being so isolated. I considered leaving early, but in the daylight with the sun streaming through the trees and birds singing, it seemed ridiculous to leave such a beautiful place because of some sounds in the night that probably had a rational explanation. That third night, I was determined to stay awake and figure out what was making the crying sounds. I made strong coffee, set up my camera by the window to record, and sat in a chair with a clear view of the forest. Around 11:30, I heard it start. But this time, it wasn't just crying. There was also a voice speaking in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese fluently, but I know enough to recognize when someone is speaking it. The voice was saying the same phrase over and over, in between sobs. I recorded it on my phone, planning to get it translated later. As I was recording, I saw movement in the forest. I pointed my flashlight toward it, and for just a second, I saw a figure in white, maybe 30 feet from the cabin. Then it was gone, like it had just vanished into the darkness. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the flashlight. I checked the recording on my camera, but the darkness and the angle meant you couldn't really see anything clearly. Just shadows and maybe a brief flash of something light-colored. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in that chair until sunrise, every sense on high alert, jumping at every sound. As soon as there was enough light, I packed my things and left. I didn't care about losing the money on the remaining nights. I just wanted to get out of there. When I got back to Tokyo, I asked a Japanese colleague to translate the audio I'd recorded. She listened to it and got this strange look on her face. She said the voice was saying, "Tasaketi," which means, "Help me," and something else she could unquite make out, but sounded like a name. Hanako, maybe. She asked me where I'd recorded it, and when I told her it was in the mountains of Nagano, she went quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I knew the history of the cabin. I didn't. She did some searching online and found an old news article from about 15 years ago. A young woman named Hanako had gone missing in that area. She'd been staying in a mountain cabin alone and had called her family one night, saying she heard strange sounds in the forest. She was going to check what it was and never came back. Her body was found several days later near a stream in the forest. The official report said she'd fallen and hit her head, but her family had always insisted there was more to the story. I felt sick reading that article. I had no way of knowing if the cabin I'd stayed in was the same one, but the area matched and the name was too much of a coincidence. I contacted the host and told them what had happened, asking if they knew about the history of the area. They never responded to my message, and when I checked the listing a few weeks later, it had been removed from the platform entirely. I've tried to rationalize what I experienced. Maybe it was the wind playing tricks. Maybe it was my imagination, primed by being alone in an isolated place. Maybe the woman's death and the sounds I heard were completely unrelated coincidences. But I can't shake the image of that figure in white, standing in the forest at midnight. And I can't unhear that voice calling for help in the darkness. I haven't been back to Japan since then, though I want to. That experience didn't ruin the country for me, but it did teach me that some places carry their histories in ways we can't always explain or understand. And sometimes, the most beautiful and peaceful places can also be the ones where the boundary between our world and whatever lies beyond it is thinnest. If these stories gave you chills, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another terrifying true story. Have you ever experienced something paranormal or unexplainable while traveling? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and who knows, your experience might be featured in the next video. And if you made it this far, comment "I survived," so I know you're brave enough to hear even darker stories. Trust me, what I have planned for the next video will make these seem tame. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the scariest part of traveling isn't getting lost. It's what finds you when you are.